Jim,
Well, Joel.
yeah, let's get started.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open, brothers, with a reading. This is from John O'Donohue, his book, "To Bless the Ground, Bless the Space Between Us." And I I opened this up earlier today and saw a blessing for healing. And I thought, well, that's perfect for our work together. And then when I opened it up, it said axioms not for healing, or I thought it said axioms for wellness. And when I opened it up, it said axioms for wildness. And I thought, well, that may be even better for us.
Well, I like that.
This is an invitation for us to find our authenticity, our true selves, and to reconnect with that energy that was so alive when we were younger, that we need in our later years to bring out the best and the most of us. So these are axioms for wildness. Alive to the thrill of the wild. Alive to the thrill of the wild. Meet the dawn on a mountain. Wash your face in the morning dew. Feel the favor of the earth. Go out naked in the wind, your skin almost aeolian. With the music inside, dance like there is no outside. Become subtle enough to hear a tree breathe. Sleep by the ocean, letting yourself unfurl like the reeds that swirl gradually on the sea floor. Try to watch a painting from within, how it holds what it never shows, the mystery of your face, showing what you never see. See your imagination dawn around the rim of your world. Feel the seamless silk of the ocean womb you in ancient buoyancy. Feel the wide imprint of surprise when you are taken in by your lover's eyes. Succumb to the warmth in the heart where divine fire glows. Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll do.
That'll do, that's right. So brothers, we welcome you to this session on the Journey of Illumination. This is an opportunity for us to get acquainted with you and you with us, and to learn a little bit more about Illuman and about our commitments, our mission, the things that we hold dear to us, our touchstones, and a chance for you to ask some questions too along the way. So I'm Joel Blunk. I've been a part of Illuman now for well, since it started, really, going back even to the days when it was known as males, men as learners and elders. And I did my rites of passage with Richard Rohr leading the way back in 2006 in upstate New York. And I now live in Richmond, Virginia, at a place called Richmond Hill that you're going to hear more about this evening and tomorrow. So it's good to be with all of you.
Joel, I'm just double checking here on the chat and making sure they can hear both of us. Can one of you guys? Okay, good. Alan says yes.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, so I was distracted. I think you just introduced yourself.
That's right. That's right. And you already know all that stuff. You need to pay attention.
I do. I know you. I could tone out right there. You know, Joel and I met, guys, right off the bat. Are you going to tell that story?
No, you tell it. Yeah.
We were, so maybe I should introduce myself first, though. I'm Jim Taylor. I'm one of the weavers and wisdom elders like Joel for Illuman. We've been around for a long time and been fortunate to have found this work when we were very ready for it, and fell in together side by side. I remember the first time I met him, I thought, this is a guy I want to hang out with, and I had no idea, that we would work so closely together all these years. I'm right now just outside of San Antonio, Texas, and it's a really beautiful day here. Blue skies and green grass, and very odd for this time of year for us. But I'm so happy to be aware of this community of brothers, that are surrounding us right now as you and I talk, and I feel their energy and their love and their desire as we have to go deeper into that which is awaiting on the horizon of our life. So how's that, Joel?
That's great. Yeah.
All right. You're gonna have to put a buzzer for me.
Well, brothers, we want to just give you a little bit of background about Illuman. And as some of you may know, this goes back to Richard Rohr's early work with men, and that led into the development of the rites of passage, and more men started gathering around both his teaching and his work, and trying to find ways to support one another and find ways to stay connected beyond the rites of passage, which is very much a mountaintop experience or a desert experience as well, sort of in the midst of that helps us to find ourselves and to begin to live into the second half of our commitments in this world. And about, I don't know how many years ago now, Jim, that Richard was feeling called to start the Living School, and some things were shifting for him and the Center for Action and Contemplation.
2010, 2011 was when that all started coalescing.
Yeah. And
so about 10 years ago.
Yeah. So the need really was for finding a way to keep that work going. And the CAC generously was willing to spin it out and to let it take on a life of its own in some ways. We're still very much connected, as you can tell, to Richard and his work, and we're grateful that he continues to join us on occasion. And he's certainly a constant resource to us and an elder in our work. But the men who had learned from him and who felt called to continue this got together, and we formed what is now known as Illuman. And even our name, I think, speaks to the journey that we want to highlight with you today. Jim, you want to say a little bit about that and sort of where the term, the Journey of Illumination, comes from?
Oh, good. I thought you were going to make me talk about the name. I never have really liked that name.
I'm not sure where it came from.
I know.
Oh, you do? Okay.
That's Damien Fognan. He came up with that.
Oh, wow.
We couldn't talk him out of it. I always liked males, men as learners and elders, which was, for those of you who are new to us, that's where we were birthed, was men as learners and elders. And I loved it, and we shortened it to males. But I loved it because it always indicated, there were things that we had learned that we were committed to sharing and passing on to other brothers, but there was always more to learn. And I noticed some of our chapters still hold that name forth. So, but yeah, so, the Journey of Illumination. Early on, guys, we were all about this men's rite of passage, as Joel indicated. It's what drew us all in. Richard had been doing men's retreats for a number of years and working also with men in prison. And there was this coalescing of ideas for him, this awareness that men were we needed help, And to shorten that story, he came up with this men's rite of passage and worked with closely with Stephen Gamble in terms of ritual. And they started off this work that men came, and uh, they were initiating quite a few men over those first 10 years as that really just began to expand. And after that started drawing together a community of initiated men, as we called ourselves, we almost walk on water, you know, but we like to say we're initiated men. But I think the reason we said that so much, Jody, because it was definitely a key marker for us in our spiritual journey.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and we'd get together and you know, have these sort of after MROP conversations around Richard. You know, he might be doing some conference that we were at or whatever, and after a little while, we became aware with more and more of those kinds of gatherings and conversations that it can't all be about the MROP. As powerful and meaningful as that experience is, there was a bigger tent to what we were doing. And as we talked about it, we realized it's this spiritual journey that every man, every person really is on. As soon as they wake up to life, as soon as they're born, there's this arc, you know, to death that we call the spiritual journey. And you may or may not, it doesn't really depend on whether the person is awake to that journey. It's happening. And somewhere in there for a man, there's this moment where he needs help from other men to incarnate into the next manifestation of himself. We know, for example, when a boy becomes a man, that's one of the key marks to move from boyhood to manhood. Indigenous cultures all over the world have been recognizing that and working with that. And Richard says he inherited that. But that's only one marker on that whole arc. And as we were talking, Joel, I don't know if you were part of that Solarized that first time in fact, it was one time where we really had a real clash. Were you there at Jemez Springs?
I think,
yeah. Yeah, it was like we had a big fight or something.
Yeah.
You remember that? It was exciting.
Yeah. Well, out of chaos,
I had at least 3 guys down.
Yeah.
You know,
things like that usually give a rise to something new and something that has to be born. And those things don't come without a little bit of pain. So
yeah. Well, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Richard sent us all out of the room. You know,
yeah.
Dad, you boys all get out of here. And he hung back. I remember Jim Clark was one of them. It wasn't me, but he hung back with a few guys, and you know, they did their magic back there. And 2 hours later, we went back in, and they had this idea, the Journey of Illumination, and it certainly wasn't fleshed out like we've done since then. But the idea was born that, hey, the big tent is this spiritual journey that all men are on, and we want to help men move along that continuum, the arc of their life. And eventually that led, you'll probably go to this, but to men transforming men. So I'll stop there.
Well, and I would simply add that all of you that are in this session with us right now are on the journey of illumination. And it has brought you to this moment, regardless of the age or stage of life that you're in. And what we want to help provide each other, and we're trying to figure this out as we go, is how to continue to nurture men, support men, encourage men, and foster this idea that we're all called to continue to mature and to live more fully in the world and to offer our gifts wherever we are. And that really is at the heart of our work. And it goes back, I think, to that original name that you brought up, Jim, males, men as learners and elders. And we've recognized in our work that there really is a dearth of true, healthy elders in our culture. And that part of what we have been hoping is that some of us would rise to the occasion eventually, and that people like Richard would help show us the way as he has continued to move into elderhood himself. And in his stepping aside was a good example for us, that there comes a time, a shift in our lives where we go from doing back to being again. But we've got to rely on each other because we need, the healthy community has every stage of life represented. And we're finding that in our work, which is why we're trying to pay attention to the early stages as well as the later stages. And if you've reviewed some of the expo, you see that there's information there about young men's rites of passage, about elder rites of passage, as well as about the men's rites of passage, which is, we think, somewhere in the middle there. So anyways, with that in mind, we would like to share with you our mission statement as Illuman. And this would be another one of those creative moments that I think is well worth sharing, that we were at an annual event called Oracle, which Jim was referring to earlier, a time when some of the leaders get together. That leadership core has grown over the years. And I would guess there were 40 to 50 of us in the desert together outside of Tucson. 5 or 6 years ago, we had just learned the way of counsel. We'd spent 48 hours, very intense hours, practicing counsel. That's all we did, in learning how to incorporate that into our work. And then we went into what we might call business. And all of a sudden, out of that just arose this statement of who we are. It was a very synergistic and beautiful and creative experience. Do you remember that, Jim? Just how
absolutely.
It taught us something, I think, and that is the importance of keeping counsel and contemplative practice always in the foreground of who we are, what we're doing, and trusting that that will pave the way for the direction that we need together. Yeah. I'm going to share my screen, Jim, if I can, and if you can let me know if this is working or not. But I have a couple of slides I want to show.
And while you're going to that, I'll just tell these guys that, like Joel just indicated, what you're about to see, we literally wrote that in like one writing, one sitting. We just together, I can't remember if we had the 5 touchstones at that point.
We did. They were part of the journey of illumination already. Something that
we hadn't really fleshed it all out. But then
right.
we wrote this mission statement, and yeah, I think it's beautiful. It's an indication that the Spirit was at work, and I think it's something more than just us.
You can see that all right, Jim?
I don't see anything.
Okay, well then I've done this incorrectly. Let me go. Okay. Try this again. How about now?
Something's coming up. Yep.
Okay, you see the Illuman mission statement?
It's a kind of a small box. I think you guys can click on that and it'll get bigger. Is that right, Joel? Well, maybe
I don't. Maybe they see it larger than we do. Maybe they can let us know in the chat if that's something.
It says click twice to maximize the video. So let me click twice and see what happens. Yeah, if you click on it twice, it'll maximize, guys, and minimize you and me, Joel. I don't know about that.
I can't see you at all at this point, unfortunately.
What?
Yeah, all I've got
let's start over.
I've got this big statement in front of me. Why don't we, Jim, just kind of read it through a line at a time, and I'll start, and then you can take the second. If you want to stop and say anything before we move on, we can do that.
Okay.
We are men transforming men through a power greater than ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we are seeking a life-changing spirituality.
Our primary concern is inner work that makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, we were really that we that second part of that sentence came out really close when we said, hey, we're doing inner work here. We're doing soul work. We're doing shadow work. We're soul attending work, but it just came right behind it that makes a difference in this world. So we're not navel gazing,
Right.
in other
Right.
words, and just infatuated with our ability to find some new hidden place in ourselves. It's work that incarnates itself in this world. Was that yours or mine?
You read the next one. That's great. And I'll comment on it. How about that?
Yeah, that's good. We are fed by the wisdom traditions of forgiveness and radical inclusivity.
What jumps out at me, I think this is very much tied, at least all this fits in here, but to our commitment this weekend to seeking masculine healing together, in particular, as we've looked at the system that we're a part of, that as Richard laid out for us last night, he called it an addictive system. But that's very different from the wisdom traditions that we feel that we're called to be a part of. And there's a real tension between, I think, the kind of life and the kind of support that we're offering for men in Illuman and the way that we experience the world around us that is calling us to something else, that is diminishing our lives or diminishing the lives of those around us because it's oppressive. And things like forgiveness and radical inclusivity are countercultural values, and they're invitations that we're constantly having to remind ourselves of. And I think those things are coming up. At least they have, as I've thought about this particular Solarize, and you'll hear more about that as the weekend goes on. But these things are growing edges for us. How do we become more forgiving? How do we become more radically inclusive?
Well, hidden in that phrase in plain sight is this idea that we all belong to each other.
Yeah.
You know, and the only way we can maintain that, and that's the part that's missing in this world. We're all fragmented, disconnected.
Right.
We don't even know who we ourselves are.
Right.
That's how fragmented we are.
Right.
And the only path that we, at least that I know, and the only path that the wisdom traditions seem to offer as an answer or solution is forgiveness.
Yeah.
And, to include that which was not included before, and to forgive, that's what brings us back together. Yeah. So
yeah.
It is a powerful phrase. I think it's your turn.
Yeah. Our work recovers traditional patterns of male initiation, affirms a masculine path to healing, reveals the true and false self, and honors the path of descent. That's a mouthful right there. That's, wow. Yeah. And that too, obviously, is very pertinent to this weekend. But you've heard us talk a little bit, and I'm sure you'll hear more as you get more involved with Illuman about our initiation rites and the ways in which we try to mark ritually these transitions in our lives in helping one another to continue to grow and to more fully become whole and integrated, which I think is another way of talking about healing and what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Joel. And I had a roar, as you did, a couple of days ago in preparation for this. And I made the comment to him that really, Richard, all the work that we do, all the spiritual work and soul work is really about the true self, false self. And he immediately agreed. And so that is the journey of illumination, isn't it? It's becoming aware of the false self and not the bad self, but the self that is not the real self. It's not the true self. And yet that false drives so much of what we do unconsciously and consciously. And the spiritual path is really waking up to that. And this slow, I think of it as this way, kind of death by 1,000 cuts. You're not going to die to the false self in one wonderful night of spiritual inspiration. It'd be
Right.
something that over a lifetime, uh,
Yeah.
and more
Well, and that's why we
finding your
call,
true self.
that's why, yeah, that's the journey, that it's ongoing work. And we take a step forward, we fall back, and we get up and we keep moving as we're able. But you're right, Jim. I think this notion or understanding of the true and false self is critical, because we continue to project onto others the very things that we can't accept in ourselves. And when we do that, we treat women poorly. We treat people who look differently than us as if they're not as valuable. And we denigrate the very earth that gives us life. And going back up to these wisdom traditions, I think that laced in there too is this idea in the importance of humility, that we have to know that we're not as important as we thought we were, and that we root ourselves again in the earth, and we find our true identity not in standing out, but in stepping in and being connected to all these things, that life is all of a piece. And if we could live that way, we would have a different world, and we would have a place where all people are honored and all gifts are shared in a way that I think is intended, and it's what we're working towards together. And that means waking up. We've got to wake up to that, as Richard talked about last night. It's a growing consciousness and awareness, those 4 circles that he talked about.
I can see why that's so compelling to Richard. He tends to bring that up quite often. And I was focused on that second one last night, grow up. And I was just thinking, wow.
And
that's
and the waking up is what you were just talking about, that waking up to our truest selves helps us to recognize that the true self is not just me, it's my oneness with everything else. And that my true identity, as Richard has taught us, is that we are beloved. And we can't at any time be alone in that belovedness. That's something we share with all creatures.
Yeah, David White says it like this: surely even you have felt the grand array. Surely even you have felt the grand array. And he says, I think next line is something about your solo voice, like pushing out your solo voice. It's so easy for us without that vision to think, well, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I'm all alone, no one knows, the trouble I've seen, and to start kind of but the reality is just the opposite. We're so connected and so integral with everything, and that is the waking up, and there's such joy and hope and love and just a profound wonder, really, when those things start to become real to you.
Yes.
All right. I don't know. Do you want to say anything else about that?
No, well, it just makes me want to read the next line. That's all. Because
I think it's my
how
turn.
do we do this? Yeah, go ahead.
Right. That's exactly what we said.
That's right.
This when we were writing this. And
right.
So you'll notice we don't call it men's rights of lectures.
Right.
It's men's lectures. It's men's rites of passage, and wonderful things that happened because we stumbled in. Well, I come from a tradition where everything, was academically driven, and so I was constantly mired in all of that stuff, giving lectures and planning out all these systematic theology books I was going to write and stuff. But the MRI, I think, for all of us, just took that right out, a possibility for us that we could not do what we're going to do from up here. And so we wrote this next line. We do this through the power of nature, being in nature, I would say, image, story, and count. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's something about each of those things that offers the possibility of transformation in our lives. And hopefully you experienced a fraction of a second of that on your wander earlier today and in your time in nature, or you know that from these things, your experience with ritual, with image, with story, and counsel. These things are all just really valuable to us, and they're key practices: going into nature, spending time with the more than human world, designing ritual that helps us to do something, to experience something, rather than, as Jim was just saying, to think about it, and to use image that is a way of transforming, that words inform us, pictures and images will transform us. That there's something that goes beyond words when we look into something. And also out of this word is the word imagination, to use our imagination, to begin to trust our imagination in ways that will help us expand. And then of course story is just a way to say more and to touch our lives. Even last night when Richard and Jim were talking, when they started telling a story, I felt drawn in differently every time. There's just something there that connects with us because we all have a story. The Journey of Illumination is our story. Yeah. And we added counsel here because we had just come out of a retreat where we learned the way of counsel, and we recognized that this in some ways connects everything. It is a ritual. It connects us to the earth, that counsel was initially practiced. And when we can do this, I would suggest you do it. And that is that you sit on the earth when you're in counsel, that you sit on the ground. And counsel was a way for us to tell stories, that the prompts that we offer are intended to open up the story of your life and to give you a chance to just share what you're experiencing. And of course, it takes imagination to enter into that and to play, literally to play at counsel in a way that it can help shape and inform us collectively.
Yeah,
so.
we really, to me, counsel, if we're outside, especially, which we did all of our early counsels, a lot of them like that. And if you're on the ground, touching the ground, it holds really the possibility of all of these aspects. We call it a contemplative practice. You're literally stepping out, you're stilling the mind, the monkey mind as we call it, and moving out of that judging, critical, strategic mind, sinking down into the heart, or the essence of who we are as human beings, that place of shared commonality, and there's compassion that arises there. And when you're speaking and listening from that place, it's so different than what happens with the head. And I forgot what I was going to say about that, and then the overhearing of each other's stories. So yeah, that's where the story, we do use story in poetry because that language is noetic. It's spiritual language. It goes below, again, the strategic mind. It gets in places that a sort of a didactic kind of can't do. So we're overhearing each other's stories. We use poetry and story as a form, an art form, but it's in line with that whole value that we're bringing forward.
Yeah. We seek to form future generations of men who will restore these practices serving to build a world that celebrates the beauty of all things.
Good.
Yeah. And that, one of the things that Richard taught us, or that he helped us to begin to think about when we were coming to these rites of passages, was that what if we could use our imagination and think 5 generations out? And certainly this is an indigenous practice to think of 7 generations. What is our impact today on the 7th generation? And Richard picked up on that and said, could we imagine the possibility that in our culture, significant rites of passage could return in 5 generations, so that our children's children and their children would know that the elders, the adults, were going to help them to continue to grow up. We live in a patho-adolescent culture today. Most of the people walking around us, and often us as well, we're chronically adolescents. It doesn't matter our age. And we've got to get beyond that if we're going to be a healthy culture again, in a healthy community. And that's part of our commitment here, is to form future generations that will help pave the way, that will be elders who are bringing the next generation into the future and making sure that they too have something to live for. And we're in crisis right now, which I think is part of the message of this weekend. We recognize that. We've got to offer something better.
Yeah, and the solutions to these kinds of crises are going to, well, I'm thinking of that phrase from, I think it was Einstein, who said you can't come up with...
You can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it, right?
That created it, yeah. So we have, did you guys catch that? I kind of took it over. Say it again, Joe. We're trying to get through this thing. This hour thing is really killing me.
I know. This is a loose paraphrase, but you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it.
Yeah. And so that's part of what this right in the beginning, men transforming men through a power greater than themselves. So we're in a conversation with that which animates everything, animates all of life, and animates us as well. And we speak to one another from that place, and we inhabit that place consciously and determinedly, intentionally.
Yes.
And so the hope is that in that transforming place, that kind of deep, speaking to deep, that we'll come up with a way of moving through this world that regenerates, brings healing, that enlivens, that stands with those who are suffering. So that solidarity and inclusivity, radical.
Yeah. So let's introduce them to the touchstone.
All right, we can.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Are you also?
How about that?
You're all right on it, man.
You can see it.
I'm so glad I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I want you to know this picture at the left here. This is where I live.
I recognize it.
Yeah. And I had this picture already with these stones stacked together in the pathway. This is a contemplative garden at Richmond Hill, and it's a beautiful place. And what you can't gather from this picture is that this is an oasis right in the heart of the city of Richmond. That I-95 is straight ahead where you're looking beyond those trees about 400 yards. And there's a lot of hustle and bustle going on right around there. But these touchstones are ways that in our lives, when things get busy and hectic, that we can stay grounded and we can remember who we are, and we can continue to do the work that we need to do as men to help us evolve and to help us to bring our best selves to bear in the world. So you want to get it started, Jim, with...
Sure. So the first one, there's 5 touchstones. Again, these aspects that keep us grounded in our spiritual journey. So every needs a centering practice, some way to ground yourself. We are men grounded in.
We talk a lot about, and I shouldn't just say talk a lot, but you will hear a lot, I think, this weekend about the importance of contemplative practice. And our contemplative practices are ways that keep us centered. And one of the most common would be just a silent sit where we, as we're able, just let go of thoughts and move to a deeper place inside and trust that we are not what we're thinking, but our center is more in the heart. And so anything that we can do that helps with that, we want to encourage and support in one another. The second touchstone is gathering, and it refers. Go ahead, Jim. Yeah, after that.
Well, I was just going to say, guys, whatever practice, spiritual practice you're doing, which is what we're talking about here, if it's not enlarging your heart, get a new practice. I just had to throw that in.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good line right there.
Well, guys, we don't just do doing practices. We do them so that the capacity of our heart enlarges, and these ideas of radical inclusivity and forgiveness are showing up in our life. Necessity to rationalize them into existence. They happen to us. It's the force, the spiritual thrust of our life. If we're connecting to God and to everything, then our heart capacity is going to be outgrowing itself regularly. Is that not right?
Yeah,
Joel?
That's it.
Yeah. I want to put a cuss word in there, because damn it.
There you go.
I've been a pastor for a lot of years, Joel, and watching people sit in those pews, and it's they're all amens until they start driving out of the parking lot, and I watch them cutting each other off trying to get to the restaurant before the Methodists, So I'm like, we need to have a part 2 to the sermon.
Well, the church, the church at large, would do well to take on contemplative practice, I think, and see itself as enlarging hearts. And what we have said and what we're saying here is that these 5 things here, these touchstones, are formative commitments that we make. That when we do them, they form us, they shape us. That God has God's way with us, and we are made different when we do this. And gathering is one of the important ways that we make sure that we are formed. As Jim said earlier, we need to hear each other's stories. We need to learn from each other, and we need to see that we're connected by way of sharing the similarities, the way that we have so much more in common than we ever thought. And that's part of the releasing of the secrets, as Jim was talking about this morning, that when we hold those secrets, they just keep us tight and afraid. But as soon as we're able to speak it out loud to another man, to a trusted other, which counsel helps provide, then those things begin to lose their hold on us, and we become free and freer. And that's why gathering is so important, that we were made, I believe, for community. And Illuman is, if nothing else, a place where men can come to gather. I'm aware, Jim, we're probably,
and so
we got about 10 minutes left. We may want to answer questions too, if we want to get through these.
Yeah, where are we going? Next steps on how to be involved. Oh, good. Yeah, I'll just kind of skip these because it just dawned on me they did talk about these last night.
That's right, Jim.
The gathering and connecting, I always tend to put those together a little bit, but whenever we do gather, it's by intention. in Illuman. We do it on purpose. We're very conscious that we're gathering together, and we already know that together we're going to connect. We're not going to waste time talking about the weather. Not really. We're there to go deep and to hear one another's stories. And as a part of that, what Bill just indicated, we're going to release us. And that's part of just the when we name it and when we put it out there in the circle, these things, these secrets you just mentioned, things that we overhear one another saying in whispers often, we put them out there, and there's a releasing that already begins to have its reality with us in that. And then it moves us to that last touchstone. We are men who honor the earth and serve the whole human community.
There's our retreat right there.
That's it. We could do it, Joel. You got to bring your guitar.
Solarize. All right. Well, we're here. We're doing that kind of work right now. We're trying to help equip one another to serve and honor and live in the world in a different way, which means we've got to move beyond patriarchy and racist behaviors and ways that we pillage the earth. That is not serving anyone. So I'm going to stop sharing, Jim, and we can see if we have some questions or if there are other things that we want to bring up.
I will, just while guys, if you want to write a question over there, if you have one, I will just touch base. Or did you want to save that next steps, how to be involved?
Go ahead, Jim. That's good. We got to get that out.
Yeah, I'm worried about our time. We have a lot of new guys, I'm hoping we do, who watch this video or who are attending right this minute, that we always say the front door really to Illuman is counsel, in my opinion. So if you're part of a counsel circle somewhere, you're already in the front door. You're going to hear quite a bit about the men's rite of passage, and you're going to hear those of us who've done it refer back to it as a critical point in our spiritual journey. So we can't help but recommend it. It feels like I'm selling Amway sometimes, Joel. Those of you who are in other countries,
you've got
multi-level marketing maybe, but it's such a profound experience. We're gonna try to get you to do it. But the front door is getting involved in counsel. In a couple of ways, virtual counsel is something that's happening online all the time. Regional chapters are starting to do it. We're about to start these new cohorts. And so one thing that we want to invite you new guys, that Joel and I are actually going to do this together. Is that right, Joel?
That's right.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, I think we're doing like six councils we're going to do together over 3 months, 2 each month, with guys who are really wanting to step in through that front door into Illuman and find out who we are and what we're all about. It'd be a much bigger discussion than what we just did in an hour, but by the time you go through that, you'll have a real sense of who we are as men transforming men. Do you want to say anything about that before we?
Well, and I think it answers Gerhard's question about, are there other councils we can participate in?
Mm-hmm.
If you'll go to the expo, you'll see that